Okay, we've looked at the plant structures. We'll look a little bit more at plant reproduction. Specifically, we'll focus on the angiosperms, which are the largest group of plants and the ones most important to us, most familiar. Again, hopefully you remember, angiosperms are the flowering plants. So these produce flowers and fruit with seeds inside. Also, angiosperms in turn in the large group of seed plants, which also includes the gymnosperms, and those seed plants are vascular plants along with ferns and club mosses, the seedless vascular plants. And then we have the bryophytes, the non-vascular plants like mosses and liverworts. Okay, but we're focused on the angiosperms. Flowers are reproductive structures. And turns out that the type of flower is very important in recognizing different types of plants. Linnaeus, who first made scientific names of plants, actually he was accused of making botany inappropriate for young ladies, talking about plant sex, while also Linnaeus did have a habit of naming things after body parts they thought they looked like. But at any rate, reproduction in flowers, we have sexual reproduction there. So we have meiosis, the dividing up twice, going from diploid, 2 copies of the DNA down to just 1 copy. And also remember the crossing over, the independent assortment, things like that, that lead to mixing around of traits in the gametes. And then once we've made an egg or sperm cell, by itself it's not going to do anything. It has to meet up with the other and fuse for fertilization. Sexual reproduction, again, leads to greater genetic variety. You're mixing contributions from usually 2 parents, some plants can self-fertilize, and creating new varieties on the DNA, which may help the offspring survive under conditions a little bit different from the parent. Plants are capable of asexual reproduction. Many have ways that they commonly do, others somewhat less commonly, but it's possible for it to happen. Asexual reproduction, one, you don't have to worry about getting pollen from somebody else. You can just reproduce without any help. And, well, you've grown this far, your DNA works. So an exact copy of that in an asexually produced offspring, now it's probably going to work as long as conditions don't change. If there is a change, then there may be a problem. But asexual reproduction works well to reproduce fast under conditions that remain the same. Asexual reproduction can occur when a part of the plant that's not a seed or spore grows into a new plant, kind of budding off and separating from the parent plant. As we talked about in lab, plants have the pattern of alternation of generation. Part of this cycle is multicellular haploid, 1 copy of DNA, part multicellular diploid. As you saw for seed plants, the haploid stage is not very multicellular, but there's at least 2 cells at a time in the male. The female's got a little more than that. So we do have the stages, but the haploid stage is very much reduced in the vascular plants, extremely so in our seed plants. So meiosis leads to haploid cells, 1 copy of the DNA, and these grow into the gametophyte. They've already got 1 copy, they've gone through meiosis already, so mitosis is actually what produces our egg and sperm cells. If those get together, we fuse. Now we're back to 2 copies of the DNA diploid, and we've got the sporophyte. It grows from that fertilized egg, and then the sporophyte, through meiosis, divides to make the haploid spores, back and forth. Flowers, made up of distinct parts. These are 4 sets in a flower that's got every possible part. Not all flowers do, but those that do can have up to 4. So we have a ring, a whirl of parts known as the sepals, then the petals, stamens, and finally carpels in the middle. Sepals basically protect and cover the outside of the flower and flower bud. Often they're green and inconspicuous, but sometimes they're colorful, looking much like the petals. Each one's a sepal. The whole set of sepals is the calyx. Next in we have the petals. These are often relatively conspicuous and colorful to try to attract pollinators to come in. Of course, it depends how it's pollinated. Many plants just depend on the wind, and of course the wind doesn't care what the plant looks like. So those typically have very small or maybe no petals at all. Just stuff sticks out to let the pollen be picked up by the wind. Plants that are pollinated by, say, things like bees or hummingbirds or things like that will have features of the petals that help to attract the pollinator, may make it easier for the pollinator to get to the plant and maybe get some nectar as well as pick up the pollen that the plant is hoping the pollinator will carry to another plant. Together, the set of petals is known as the corolla. What that has to do with the Toyota, I'm not sure. Next we have the stamens. These are the parts actually directly involved in reproduction as opposed to the attract the pollinator stuff, although they often play a role in that as well. So the stamens are the male structures. There's characteristically thread-like stalk, the filament, and then at the top is the sac known as the anther, where pollen is formed. Pollen grain, you have 2 reproductive cells there plus an outer wall. So, well, it's multicellular, it's 2, barely for our haploid gametophyte, very, very reduced here. Moss, the gametophyte, was actually the bigger, more prominent part. We've changed quite a lot from that in our seed plants. One of those 2 cells in the pollen grain divides to form the 2 sperm cells. The other grows into a tube that the sperm cells travel in to reach the egg cell. Again, we looked at this in lab. The carpels, the middle part, you could carpel in a corolla. Those are the female reproductive organs. And the carpels have the ovaries, which are the parts that hold, specifically the ovules, the parts that become the seed. So carpels together, maybe it be just one, and maybe multiple ones, make up the pistil. Pistils, typically, you've got the top end, if the flower is pointing up, which is the stigma. That's where pollen grains can land. Maybe a bee has pollen on and it's brushed off there. Maybe wind carries it there, whatever, depending on the pollination pattern. Style is kind of a stalk where the pollen tube will grow. And then, again, the ovary is where the egg cell is. So here's a diagram of a flower that has all of those parts. Stems down here. And then we have the green sepals, what cover the bud. The petals, helping to attract, in this case, some sort of small insect. Here are the stamens, the male structures producing pollen. And then the pollen, if it lands on a stigma of a compatible flower, then the pollen tube will grow down to the style and reach to one of the ovaries and get to an ovule in it. Okay, so the ovule, female gametophyte, we have a particular diploid precursor cell that goes through meiosis. So meiosis, copy DNA once, divide twice, and so we get 4 haploid cells from a diploid starting cell. These cells are not even. One is much bigger than the others. The 3 small ones don't have much of anything, they break down. The one larger one divides a couple times mitotically, and we end up with 7 cells making up the female gametophyte, which is not much, but male only had 2, so a little bit bigger there. The egg cell is one that's involved in fertilization in the flowering plants. 7 cells. If we start with 1 cell and divide it, we get 2 cells. If we divide each of those, we get 4. If we divide each of those, we should have 8. But we only had 7. One of those cells, the nucleus divides, but the cell does not divide in 2. So we've got a cell with 2 nuclei, and then the egg cell, and then the remaining 5 cells besides that, again, are small and basically just take away the extra material. Meanwhile, anthers, we have a starting diploid cell, goes through meiosis, makes 4 haploid cells. Male, pollen, that's small, does not require a bigger, more nutrient-rich cell, so all 4 of them can each grow into 1 grain of pollen. So each of those will divide, now ordinary cell division, mitosis, and so you get that 2-cell immature male gametophyte there. Again, one of those 2, the pollen tube, the other will become the 2 sperm cells. So here we have that division, extra cells. We have a starting cell that divides, big one here ending up forming the egg, and the cell with 2 nuclei, and other ones that are lost in the male, dividing, forming 4 developing pollen grains. Pollination is the process of getting that pollen then from the male flower or male flower part to the female flower part. Some plants may self-pollinate. Pollen may stay within the same flower even, or transfer between different flowers on a single plant. Or we may have cross-pollination where pollen from one plant comes to another. Some plants may have separate male and female flowers. This will be either both on one plant or different plants having them. Ginkgo, of course, doesn't have flowers, but it does have separate male and female plants. So that pattern is found there. Of course, separate male and female plants can't self-fertilize. So that helps promote mixing the genes around.